Hey, welcome back to The Dive. Today on the show, we have Joe Mazumdar from Exploration Insights. He's going to share some of his thoughts about the Fed's possible pivot, key metrics that he uses to assess new projects, explorers that have caught his attention lately, ESG investing impacting the mining sector, copper, silver, gold, and recent M&A activity heating up. Hey, Joe, welcome back to The Dive.
Hi, how's it going? Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. Now, let's start off with some macro. Do you think that we will see a Fed pivot in 2023?
I think it's highly unlikely because, to get the inflation rate down to their target, which I don't think is going to change to 2% before the end of the year, is going to be difficult. And a Fed pivot is implying, I'm thinking, a reduction or a shift of where they're moderating the rate hike. So depending what you call a pivot, if the pivot is just moderating the rate hikes, that's possible. Rate cuts, no, I don't think so.
Okay, now from following you online, it appears you have been traveling quite a bit, and you're constantly reviewing and seeing new projects. We have to ask, what are the key metrics that you use to assess new projects?
Yeah, the thing about going to projects is you get to see what's in the press release and then try to relate it to what you're seeing on the ground. And you get to talk to the local geologists and see what they're seeing and what they think is important. And then when you read the press releases and, put into your head what's going on, you got a better idea of what they're targeting and what then you can add your input about whether you think that's possible or not. Access is an issue, so you can see like, hey, it's 100 kilometers or 200 kilometers, but hey, it takes 8 hours to get there. Is it helicopter supported? How much does it cost per meter? A lot of this you can get from the press release or from talking to them, but you can actually see that in action. And for me also, some of my best site visits is when I can see the junior explorer and what they've got, and then I can go next door to an operation like I did in Zambia when I saw a junior explorer that had ground near the Kansanche mine, so I can see what they were exploring for and what I was actually being mined next door. And so for me, that's a really one of the better site visits you can do.
Do you care to share which explorers and projects have really caught your eye lately and why?
Well, just recently we added a company called Headwater Gold that's got a lot of properties in the Great Basin of the western U.S., and they managed to cut a really nice deal with a major called Newcrest Mining, ASX listed, and also TSX listed, but mostly Australia-based major producer, precious metal producer, which allows the major to earn into several of their projects. One of their big projects that they're drilling is called Spring Peak, which is in the Walker Lane district of the western part of Nevada. They hit some good intersections just yesterday, and thankfully the market reacted positively to them. So hopefully we'll see more of that this year where somebody's putting out a release and people actually notice.
Okay, now copper has jumped to a 6-month high. Some say that this is due to China reopening its borders. What do you believe is China's influence on copper?
Yeah, and China's influence in copper is they're the largest consumer of copper, so they have obviously have a big influence on the demand equation. And last year with the zero COVID-19 policy and the restriction of probably a lot of economic activity, that had a negative impact on copper. But the positive impact on the price was the fact that we've had a lot of supply constraints. We've had issues in Chile with changing the taxes, that policy, the royalty policies, issues with water. There's not enough water. And then also in Peru, changing of governments, and then also a lot of restrictions of getting the copper to the market. So with China down, those impacts on the supply side really didn't take much, it didn't impact the price as much. Now, if China is coming back with, there's still the risk that when they come back that they might generate more cases and then have to slow down again. But right now, if they come back, those impacts on the supply side, which I'm really watching, is what makes me the most bullish about copper.
How do you see copper evolving from here?
Well, the truth is that the problem with copper is there's just not enough supply. I mean, if we don't know about a project right now, I mean, getting a discovery into production is like 15 to 20 years. So I don't see how we're going to meet these deficits that are coming up in 2025, and could actually, come earlier because of some of the production that we see is probable through expansions might be deferred right now because of big companies investing in Chile and Peru and not sure of if they're going to get their money back. And then overarching that is a background what we're seeing happening in Panama with Cobre Panama and First Quantum, and the government insisting on changing the tax rules there. So that's another thing copper companies have to think about, because they're not investing a couple of $100 million, they're investing several billion in these projects.
How do you find ESG investing is impacting miners? Do you think that it's hurting the juniors at all?
It is impacting the miners in that, it might restrict, on supply demand, it might restrict the amount of production, because if there's, on the Western side, I don't think the Chinese producers care as much, but definitely on the Western side, if there are ESG funded institutions and then they say, hey, look, your power is being, sourced from oil or gas or coal, so we're not going to invest in you, suddenly that project's going to have a higher cost of capital and might not get built. So it's hard to see that the amount of production that we need to fill the deficit all being from green energy, and also meeting the demand needs.
Now, gold and silver markets have had a good run recently. How sustainable do you think that this is?
Well, the thing is about gold is it's been surprisingly resilient last year, even though the dollar was up significantly. It was very strong. The gold price was basically flat, and in most currencies other than the U.S. dollar, it was actually up. So the gold price has been doing quite well despite all the macro background of rising real rates, which basically surprised me. The problem really for producers is the fact that their gold price is flat, but the costs are increasing. So for a copper company, where copper is sort of like an input into inflation, they could see rising revenue with higher costs. But we're not seeing that with gold. And so my issue with the producers is more compressed margins. And now the issue is for the bigger producers that have been pushing for dividends and then trying to attract these value investors that are looking for dividends, is whether they can basically, compete with, in terms of use of their dwindling free cash flow, to say, am I going to use that in capital investments to grow my production or sustain it, or am I going to use that money to pay sustainable dividends?
Now, looking beyond gold and silver, do you expect to see M&A activity heat up this year as majors continue to look for ways to boost their reserves?
Yeah, I can see that probably, in both, let's say, the copper and gold markets. We've seen M&A in copper with Rio Tinto taking out the other part of Turquoise Hill that they didn't own to consolidate their ownership of Oyu Tolgoi, a large copper project mine in Mongolia. And then also we saw a bid by BHP to take out Oz Minerals early part of the year, and that had some issues as well. But eventually, before the end of the year, they took that out. So I can see more M&A in the copper sector. But just realize that even in the copper sector, when we're seeing all this M&A, it's growth for the company, but it's not growth in production for the copper sector. So we're not going to see more copper. We're just going to see different people developing it. Which I don't think changes the supply equation. On the gold side, if major producers continue to want to issue sustainable dividends and don't reinvest in their projects, then I could see them trying to buy more production through share purchases.
Okay, Joe, well, that's all we have for you today. Before you leave us, could you let our audience know where they could go to get more of your commentary?
Sure. I mean, they could follow me on Twitter and LinkedIn using my name, Joe Mazumdar. And then there's the Exploration Insights website, www.explorationinsights.com. It's a paid newsletter for subscribers, and there's a portfolio in there, and we talk about the companies that we're buying and selling. But also, if you just want to know about site visits on a high level, I reproduce some of the site visits in Twitter and LinkedIn as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this with us today, Joe, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. We will be back again tomorrow with the latest in small cap news coverage. So if you like this kind of thing, be sure to subscribe below and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out. Bye.